What happens when the fight against political violence becomes political violence itself? When even hearings about unity turn into partisan battlegrounds? Senator Cory Booker's words here cut deeper than politics. He's exposing how America's obsession with blame and tribal identity is making the country less safe, less moral, and less human.
I find hearings like this frustrating. And they deepen, to me, what is a problem in our country, which is a growing tribalism and our inability to come together and work on issues where we have so much common ground. It's not a senator in the United States, and I know them well and have friends on both sides of the aisle, that condemns political violence, that does not condemn political violence. But when we hold hearings that come at this issue that reflects the partisanship of our time and the tribalism of our time, we don't get to a solution. We are in a crisis right now, and there is growing political violence and a growing justification for it. But I find it stunning that the way we talk about it seems more about grievance politics and trying to score points than actually getting to the root of what is an American problem. And it frustrates me when that is so transparent and clear, especially when we don't talk about people on our own side of the aisle. Chuck Schumer was very wrong in what he said, and my colleague held up the quote. I've actually seen that quote. I've lost count of how many times my colleagues have raised that quote. But you know what they never say? Is that he came out and apologized for it. That Chuck Schumer, using self-interrogation, said, I was wrong. I've never seen the President of the United States who has spoken about punching people in the face, who has said a lot of violent rhetoric, has never given that type of self-interrogation. I don't understand how we could be having a hearing right now at a time when threats on the senator sitting up here have gone through the roof, where we can't have a constructive conversation, but instead are pitting witnesses against witnesses, many of whom, like Mr. Hodges, have had to sit there and relive his trauma over and over again in hopes that something would be done about the problem. And God, we should just tell the truth. There is political violence. Extremists who have left-wing ideologies and right-wing ideologies. To say it's just one and not the other is to deepen the problem. But we have an administration right now who is eviscerating the people that should be keeping us safe, and who is pulling down from the website, as they did earlier this year when the Department of Justice removed from its website a government-funded report published last year that found that the number of far-right attacks continues to outpace all other types of terrorism and domestic violence extremism. If we can't accurately describe a problem and do it without partisan rhetoric or seeking to score partisan points, we will not solve this problem. I have a lot of colleagues that are wiser and more full of grace. I'm a big believer about faith, that before you tell me about your religion, first show it to me and how you treat other people. If you ascribe to the beliefs of my faith, of Jesus Christ, God, show grace. And I still remember bemoaning to Tim Kaine about the problems we have in our growing hostile, degrading and demeaning political climate. And he said, the only way this is ever going to be cured, he said to me, was by each of us showing every single day a relentless commitment to ideals of extending grace to one another. I haven't heard any of that rhetoric in the little bit of this hearing that I've listened to. I've heard finger-pointing, condemnation, demeaning and degrading that reflects our partisan divide. This is the American problem. I am so frustrated to sit before members of our law enforcement who have suffered in our house trying to protect us violence that I never imagined could happen. And yet we have an inability to name it and condemn it and commit ourselves to doing something about it. I will do my best to call it like it is. To hear quotes that I've even said that need to be tamped down, because the only thing that's going to save our country now is not more political posturing and partisan finger pointing. The only thing that's going to get us out of this condition is for courageous leaders in both parties to start standing up and extending grace and self-introspection. It's a lot easier when I call out Chuck Schumer's comments to make a difference. And God, I wish I'd see more of my colleagues being willing to call out the President of the United States for his outrageous comments as well. Thank you.
Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to each.
What Senator Cory Booker does here isn't just express frustration. He's holding up a mirror to the entire political system. This hearing was supposed to be about how to stop political violence, yet even in that space, the conversation devolved into the same cycle of finger-pointing, hypocrisy, and selective outrage that fuels the very problem they claim to want to solve. Booker's point is painfully clear. America can't heal what it refuses to name honestly. Because the truth is, political violence isn't owned by one side. It's a disease that spreads when tribal loyalty becomes stronger than truth, when moral consistency becomes optional, and when people care more about defending their team than defending basic decency. And he's right. There isn't a single senator, Democrat or Republican, who stands up publicly and says, "I support political violence." No one says that. But their actions and silence often tell a different story. When threats against lawmakers skyrocket, when elected officials use violent language to rally supporters, when people minimize violence depending on who committed it, that's when the hypocrisy starts to rot the system from within. Booker highlights a powerful contrast. Chuck Schumer made a mistake, but he apologized. He took responsibility, something rare in Washington. Compare that to Trump, who has never expressed regret for rhetoric that openly glorified aggression and dehumanized opponents. Booker's not making a partisan point, he's making a moral one. He's saying, if accountability only applies to your enemies, you've already lost the moral high ground. And when he says he's frustrated, it's not performative. You can hear it in his voice, the exhaustion of someone who genuinely wants to see America do better, but keeps watching politics turn compassion into weakness and reflection into ridicule. He talks about grace, a word you almost never hear in political spaces anymore. Grace is the willingness to listen, to forgive, to look inward before you lash outward. And in this toxic atmosphere of endless outrage, grace has become almost radical. What's most profound about Booker's statement is that he connects violence not just to weapons or ideology, but to the spiritual decay of American politics. The inability to admit wrong, the eagerness to humiliate, the addiction to outrage. That's the ecosystem where violence thrives, because violence doesn't just come from hatred, it comes from hopelessness, from the feeling that there's no bridge left to cross. When he says this is an American problem, he's reminding everyone that violence doesn't care about party lines. It grows wherever empathy dies. And right now, empathy is on life support. This moment should force us to ask ourselves something uncomfortable. What kind of country do we want to be? One where every tragedy becomes a talking point, or one where leaders actually confront the causes of that tragedy? Because if hearings meant to stop violence turn into theater for outrage, then the violence isn't just physical anymore. It's cultural, psychological, and spiritual. Booker is calling for something radical, not more policy, but moral courage. He's saying that the real solution won't come from legislation or sound bites, but from leaders willing to condemn their own side when it's wrong, to extend grace when it's hard, and to choose truth over tribalism even when it costs them politically. Until that happens, America will keep mistaking performance for principle and wondering why the violence never stops. If you value real dialogue over empty division, if you believe politics should still have a moral core, like this video, share it, and subscribe to Left Lens, where we break down not just what's said, but what it means for the soul of this country.